Hello and good evening, and I'm popping back in to make a video again in the series on narcissists and the shame vulnerability vortex, right? So I guess you could call this, what triggers them. It almost makes me want to say, like, what's their kryptonite? Maybe we can put it that way. So I spoke to that shame vulnerability vortex, which is getting harder and harder for me to say as the day goes on. But that's in the previous video. And then earlier today, I just fired off a list of this, based on what I've heard with people in therapy, and then based on my own experience and based on research. So if shame and vulnerability feel intolerable, which they do for all of us, but it's more so true for people who have narcissistic traits, and I would argue all of the axis 1 and axis 2 cluster B and C personality disorders have this as a feature. This need to quickly take away whatever bad thing they're feeling. So this should sound pretty familiar, but what I've written here is what mitigates shame and what makes them feel better in the moment, because that's exactly what needs to happen, right? Just there's that very low tolerance for feeling shame. So number 1, instant gratification. Shopping, gambling, gaming, sex, food, alcohol, other substances, anything that temporarily gives that dopamine hit that helps them to instantly but temporarily feel better. Number 2, winning, or the perception of having won something, or undermining someone else. And if you were the person who was the catalyst for them to feel that way, you just became a part of that game. Number 3, being critical of others. Overt or grandiose narcissists do this out in the open and openly give back all that shame they feel. And coverts may only do this in their own head or on social media. Here's my personal favorite one. Number 4, sniping, being sarcastic, or microaggressions. So this is like when maybe you're wearing a particularly nice outfit, you've put yourself together nicely, and you get a kind of backhanded compliment, or there's just this sort of nasty, low-level, low vibrational response to it. That's an example of what I'm talking about. And it's a microaggression if it is something that happens frequently and without consciousness. And I'm calling out an intimate microaggression if it's your partner or a parent or a sibling or a friend, and they know your fragile point or your vulnerability point, and then they go directly after that, right? So again, that's my favorite one. 5, surrounding themselves with people they know as inferior or that they think are inferior in some way. And then number 6 goes with that one, which is circling or surrounding themselves with people who feed their ego. This is much more subtle in reality than what we think it is, but I believe that grandiose narcissists particularly have a bit of a posse, right? That these are people that they call when they're not feeling great about themselves. So they're either people that are easy to pick on, maybe, or people who really shore the narcissist up in some way. Number 7, revenge fantasies and sometimes really acting on them. Number 8, discarding and devaluing. Number 9, maligning others or controlling a narrative. So those two things in my mind go together. So they might spin a story about you based on how you made them feel. I've actually had this happen where I had no idea, that anything I said or did was hurtful. And as empaths, we all friggin' well know when what we've said is hurtful, right? So, but if you've said something in a moment and the other person has gone off and they're kind of stewing and brewing about it and you've made them feel bad, one of the ways they might make themselves feel better is completely spinning the story of what's happened, creating a false narrative, and, just retelling it in a way where they get to be the hero in the story, maybe, or the victim. I think that's more common, where they get to be the victim in the story. Number 10 is very much connected to number 9, which is creating a smear campaign, right? So starting to influence the way other people think about you. And they can, again, if they've got their posse handy, like there's the willing audience for this, right? So these all connect in with one another. So I wanted to address this a little bit, just to give a bit of a backstory or context for why people might behave in the manner in which they do. And I don't think any of this that I've just talked about is strictly something that narcissists do. I think it's something that we all might do sometimes, but there are situations where you really want to have the upper hand in knowing this information. So particularly at work, right? If you have a manager, a boss, a supervisor who has narcissistic traits, it is really helpful to know that you need to watch your step and be careful with what you say. Again, none of us are responsible for how someone else feels. They are. However, it is important to know that, of course, you didn't cause this and you're not to blame, because I think people get really confused about this. So if you are someone, and most of us are, who takes on a lot of responsibility for other people's emotions and how other people feel, this can be very confusing. It also can be a point where you become manipulated or where you lose your power, right? So what do narcissists do when they lose their sense of power? They do move heaven and earth to get it back, right? It's lifeblood to them. So I'm going to be continuing to be posting content on taking this more holistic look at narcissism. Sort of beginning with a common human wound, which is feeling shame and feeling vulnerable. And if you have a narcissist in your life, you can observe this. You can watch them in a nanosecond. You can see that shame or vulnerability register in their expression. And then in another nanosecond, it gets replaced with an expression of contempt. You can see it. So you will see, that little inner child come through, very quickly followed by their sort of like their bitter, older, wiser self, if you will, or their protector self, which I think is closer to the truth, really come to the fore. So I'm hoping that this is providing either a reminder or new information or new ways of thinking about it. Please, please, please join a discussion in the comments, or, pop into Inquire Within on Facebook, where we can carry on the discussion. Reach out to me if any of this resonates with you. I would love, love, love to have you join the healing community. And like, share, subscribe. Let's keep the conversation going. And thank you so much for joining me. Take very good care.